So welcome everyone. This is the first in hopefully a good long series of events that we're going to plan online for the INCOSE UK Early Careers Forum. I won't go too much into introducing us all, but myself and Akin, I believe, are the only two people here today that are on the committee. Hopefully you'd recognise us from anything that you've been to before for ECF, or indeed the annual Systems Engineering Conference, ASEC, which we were available at in where was it last year? Liverpool in 2023, and will be again up in Edinburgh in November of this year. Very welcome to all of you. I believe that most of you, I do recognise all of your names, so I'm sure that all of you are aware of what the ECF stands for and what we're trying to achieve. So it's basically a forum for people who are new into systems engineering, want to connect, learn and grow with each other, and we're hopefully just trying to provide that platform to do so. So this event series is part of that. Thank you, Tom. Next slide. Yeah, so Tom's joining us. He's from the Northrop Grumman Corporation, and he's a lead systems engineer in systems engineering and validation and verification V&V. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yep. Yeah. Hello all. As Tyler said, my name's Tom, and I'm a practice lead for systems engineering and V&V. So quick little bit of background about myself. I actually started off as a systems engineer or systems and control engineer at university a few years back now. So I got a B.Eng in that, and I've been a chartered engineer since 2019. So I don't know if any of you are working towards chartership already or already have done, but I suggest keep going. And obviously the INCOSE have the ACEP and the CCEP, which are always good as well. So, you know, all that professional registration, always good. And since my time at university as well, I've got over a decade of experience in aerospace. That was a company's Spanish-owned company who Rolls-Royce also part-owned, called ITP Aero, where I worked on the control system for business jet engines. So that's pretty interesting. Certification and testing and all sorts along the way there. Also, I've worked for HS2, which was construction rail, and I'm in defence, as Tyler said, with Northrop Grumman. So today I was asked to talk about management in systems engineering, which is something, you know, I'd like to think not too long ago I was in your shoes and have slowly progressed into various leadership roles over the last few years. So today I'm going to, a bit of an intro as I've already done. I'm going to talk about team leadership, which is often much different to technical leadership, which is another area. So I'll talk about key skills in team leadership, understanding and allocating your team, so giving them the work, the delegation side of things, which is a little bit different, and training. So obviously, rather than thinking about yourself, you've got a whole team to think about. And then technical leadership, again, key skills around technical leadership, and then a bit on building knowledge. And then, of course, it wouldn't be systems engineering without bringing it all together at the end. And obviously some time at the end for Q&A as well, which I hope you've got some questions at the end. I'll be happy to answer those. Okay, so in terms of introduction then, what is management in systems engineering? I think from my perspective, management is a fairly common theme depending on whichever roles you are in. Obviously there are differences in the technical side, but yeah, for example, with team leadership, you're always going to have some level of team leadership with management in systems engineering. You'll usually have a lot of like-minded people. Systems engineering is quite a niche, and I think from what I can tell, we're probably quite well aligned with each other on the whole, which is helpful and sometimes a hindrance, but we'll come to that later. Technical leadership, obviously that's more about your skills in systems engineering and how you lead a team with that knowledge you have in the subject. So it's almost becoming the subject matter expert. Sorry. A third aspect is something that might become new and you learn quite quickly at this point is understanding the business. So there aren't, you're no longer just an engineer working on a project. You are now looking at metrics. So you're looking at how much things cost, how long things are taking. Your exposure to other teams is greater, and you obviously slowly become more responsible for your team in those aspects as well. So it's another level of things to think about, which is always, I find, very interesting. My systems brain turns into just an extension of our current systems, and how they all fit together as well. And which brings me on nicely to the last point there, synergy. Hopefully that's a word you're all fairly familiar with systems engineering. It's about just bringing it all together, as I've said, and making sure it all works. So in terms of team leadership, a few key skills I've brought together here. The first one, I think, at any point in your career, clear communication, and in particular as you become a manager, to all types of people, is a real key to success in a lot of areas. I've had a lot of experience in that in my time. As I said, a lot of the time you're dealing with engineers and it's a little bit easier. Systems, you end up with hardware and software engineers. They're all a little bit different. We had a guy, hardware engineer, who was, he'd feel much more at home down the pub with all the plumbers and all the electricians, whereas you have the software engineers who don't want to go anywhere near a pub, and everyone in between. There's a real big difference, and it's about clearly communicating with all of those. I even had at my time at HS2, I had to convince an artist that what I was doing was correct, and I provided all the facts, and they didn't like it because they didn't feel like anything was right. A few days later, I presented the same facts, but talked about my feelings the whole way through, and wouldn't you know it, they thought it was great. So again, it's pretty interesting in terms of things like that. Another aspect to sort of team leadership is understanding and facilitating to build a team culture. There's, again, usually I think most teams are fairly happy with each other, but just building that morale up and having people enjoy come to work. You're going to hold on to the good people if you do that a bit more. If they're happier, they stay. If they're happier, they probably work a bit better as well. And if you have that across the team, it does make life a little bit easier, which is always helpful in management. The next one is the ability to direct, lead, and motivate, or sometimes forceful encouragement of your team. So again, this is possibly a bit new as you move into management. Directing is obviously, you're now telling people what to do. Leading is well, that's a blanket statement. There's lots of things to think about there. Motivation, that can be anything, depends. I had a pretty young team at some point in my days at ITP. So we actually ended up having, I used my metrics, maybe this isn't entirely ethical, but I used my metrics to create a bit of a competition between my team, and they all bought into it. So I think it was a lot of fun, but we essentially had well, we end up with one of the best feedbacks inside the company, with the people who were in our team enjoyed work the most. So, you know, motivation is a really good thing to understand. And then forceful encouragement, you know, it's not all sunshine and rainbows in management. You do have to put your foot down. You do have to have difficult conversations. If people are underperforming, you have to find a way to get behind them. And I don't know who's looked into the insights where you have different colors. Has anybody come across that in their time? Put your hand up or quickly come off mute. Yeah, a couple of thumbs up. So yeah, your insights, you know, there are red people who are the sort of quite assertive and do it my way type guys. You know, sometimes you just have to get under their skin to get things done, whereas sometimes you have to be really happy and friendly to other guys to get things done. So, you know, there's almost like a psychology aspect to some of these key skills. Another one is delegation. So yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I've got another slide on that one. Understanding and implementing training needs. As I mentioned earlier, you're no longer just thinking about yourself now, you're thinking about everybody else. So, you know, things like identifying strengths and weaknesses. And again, I'll go through this a bit more in a minute. And then a last one on here is, it's something that not all people think about. You become a confidant to your colleagues or your team. You have to perform conflict resolution sometimes and disciplinary activities. I'll be honest, most of those aren't very nice. You know, I've had people, for example, come to me with talking about family issues, and they were pretty unpleasant, I'll be honest. And you know, courts were involved, police were involved, things like that. You know, they bring that to work because, you know, it's hard to let go. So you do have to have those conversations. But you know, you should be getting, once you become a manager, you do get a bit of training on how to sort of deal with these. And obviously part of it comes down to how you are as a person as well. And then, yeah, disciplinary activities. I had an old employee who didn't really like the team, didn't really like the work, sorry, not the team, and would often sit there shopping for trainers, and it was making the other team, the rest of the team, like lose morale a little bit. So having to take that person to the side, and I ended up sort of raising it to the head of department to say we need to move him, and you know, it was pretty unpleasant because he was a clever guy and he worked hard. He was just in completely the wrong environment. So, you know, finding that new environment was a real positive, even though it was a little bit painful along the way. So yeah, just a few key skills. So another one is understanding and allocating your team. So something I try and do is build a little bit of sort of connection at a personal level. You know, if you understand who they are, what they like, what they're into, what sort of gets them ticking, you know, it helps you make decisions at some point, whatever they might be. Another one is building trust. So something that you might come across even now is that you might think, oh, I need to give this to someone to do. You might end up feeling like that person's not going to do a very good job. So it's about understanding what the reason is behind that. Maybe it's just not their thing. Maybe they just don't understand it. You know, can you do training to build them knowledge, which is then going to gain, like, create that trust across the team. So yeah, it's important to trust in your team. Another one is, well, a couple here, identifying strengths and weaknesses. Again, if you're going to go out and start delegating, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, you need to understand people's strengths, you need to understand their weaknesses. Systems is a massive, it's a massive area, you know, whether you're working in, with the hardware team, the software team, electrical models, you know, that it can go in all directions pretty quickly. You start throwing in there the business level things as well, and you've got to start thinking about who you really want to put in front of a head of department or a customer. You know, knowing people's strengths and weaknesses in, say, presentations becomes pretty relevant pretty quickly as well. Another one more related to the technical side, you've got deliverables and timescales. So, you know, what's urgent, what's, you know, if you've got a customer deliverable coming up and you know it's in 2 weeks, you probably should be putting your time and effort into that, not something that's maybe not a deliverable or a few months down the line. It's not to say you shouldn't do it though. I'm sure we're all been in a position where we wish we'd have done something 2 months sooner when we had a little bit of spare time. So again, identifying that is always good. Consider technical management activities. So that's, you know, utilizing things like tools, talking to your project managers, processes. You know, there's a real opportunity there. You know, if someone's written a process, they can help someone else lead that next time around, for example, which expands the knowledge across the team. And then on the very big picture, you've got the individuals, you've got the teams, and you've got the business needs. You know, it's everything from, for example, some of the guys on here, I believe, are quite young, early careers. Obviously, early careers forum in this area. If you're a graduate, you don't just want to be doing what the business wants. You want to be learning and growing. So it's about striking that balance between what the individual wants, what the team needs, and what the business needs. And yeah, that's always good to consider when you think of things like training and delegation, to try and expand that knowledge. Okay, so delegation. Has anybody on this call today, have you experienced delegation in any of your roles?
Yeah, for myself, it's been a real learning curve recently. And I can speak for my colleagues as well. I know that Peter has been doing it for years and mentoring loads of people, and myself, Akin, and Henda that are on here are getting involved with that more and more every single day. So it's a test, and it is a lot about putting trust in other people, but then also, you know, not just leaving them to go and fail, but to actually support them along the way and sort of collectively come to that result.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think one of the biggest, I guess, shock is, you know, when you've been used to being the one doing the tasks and now you have to delegate. It's a little bit of you almost have to try and force yourself to not think too much about it. Give it to someone and let them do it, and not actually have to go back every second to check, are you doing all right? Because it's yeah, it's something I'm having to learn, because it can be quite it can be quite a change if you're not used to giving work out to people. Like, that's, I guess, the one thing I'm finding about delegating tasks.
Yeah, absolutely, Akin, and it is a different world, because I think earlier in your career, you know, you're set a task, you go and do it. You're probably following what someone's telling you to do or some sort of process document, and then all of a sudden, it just completely flips, and like you say, you're redirecting those tasks now, because essentially what usually happens is you become responsible for a project or a group of tasks or whatever it is, and you know, all of a sudden you know you can't do all that. It's, you know, you're not going to get five people's worth of work done, even if you're really good at it all and you really enjoy doing it all. You you've got to start redirecting those tasks or initiatives to your team members. And I think one of the first mistakes a lot of people make is that they think that those other people know what to do, and they'll just say, oh, you need to do this, and then they'll try their best to be hands off and walk away. And really, you need to make sure at the start you've got clear priorities, clear context, clear goals, timescales, and budgets if you're delegating that off as well. If you haven't got all or most of those that you need, it becomes a burden for everybody. So it's really important to take that time at the start. If you're thinking like a systems engineer, you set your requirements out. That's what you do at the start. That's just what you do. So it's the same in delegation. You've got to set them what they need to do at the start, and yeah, hopefully, if it goes well, you've succeeded. And it's not just about redirecting tasks either. You can distribute the responsibility. So, for example, I delegated. So I had my baby from years ago was I pretty much automated a whole bunch of test analysis for one of our aerospace customers. And it was all scripted in MATLAB. It all did all these really sort of fancy things. It made it very easy to do tasks, and eventually I had to pass that on to someone else. And I said, well, this is yours now. You go do it. Do what you need to do. Now, on one side, as I put there, this guy, he was really motivated. He was really excited to pick it up. He took it and started delegating to the team that we gave him. Fantastic. However, something you have to remember, and I didn't set out my clear priorities, context, all that good stuff. I didn't give him a set resource in this instance. So every time I came in the morning, he decided he needed more people and would have reassigned the rest of my team to himself, which, it was a lot of fun. I'll be honest. It was a lot of fun for a couple of weeks. And however, it does start to hinder because you're not getting momentum with some of the team. So anyway, luckily from some of the slides earlier, I understood how my colleague Chris, how he worked, and he loved rules. So I decided one afternoon I needed to create some rules. So I made a new rule, and we had a whiteboard in the office, and I put everyone's names on the whiteboard, and I said only I'm allowed to change the whiteboard, and only people on either side are allowed to work in those areas. So again, you can solve it. You just have to understand how the people work. But again, it comes back to having those sort of the clear sort of budget essentially in this case. And again, you kind of base it on how you understand your team, as I mentioned earlier. And again, as you said as well, you trust but verify. I'm sure you all heard of that phrase before. You can trust people to do a job. Doesn't mean you shouldn't verify they are doing the right job. Something I do a lot of the time is at the start of something, I try and check in maybe once a day, or slow it down to once a week, or eventually once a month. Depends on what it is and how long it takes. But there's always that, and obviously if there are gaps where you want to delegate, there's always training. That's always good as well. And then again, as you mentioned, I think four key points as well for delegation. One, let go. I know it's difficult. You just got to do it. Honestly, there's no like phased approach to this. Just do it is my advice. It's very uncomfortable, but you do get used to it. And like I say, you begin to understand how you can trust but verify to kind of keep yourself a little bit happier there. The next one is share the pain. There is going to be some pretty awful tasks that we have to do at some point. I'm sure, raise your hands. I'm sure we've all been there where we've done some horrible mandrolic task for a few days or if not weeks. Is anyone doing any of those at the moment, or are you all lucky?
I used to do document control, so I was very rigorous and procedural. And on the topic of delegation, I was actually the single point of contact at one point because we were a two-man team. My colleague was signed off with stress for a couple of months, and I was a single point of contact, and I had one volunteer that I had to train up, and we had a large workload, and I had to. It was quite difficult. Delegation is one of those things which I found really difficult because I was so stuck in a procedural kind of like, okay, I do this. I know how to do this. I can do it, but can I trust someone else to do it? And it was very much a case of sitting down with this volunteer, this extra person that I had to help me, and going through the process and saying, okay, so when you do this, so like training them up, and then delegating portions of work every morning, like saying, okay, well, you can do here, you know how to do these, I trust you to do these documents, go away and do them, I'll check in with you this afternoon. And that exercise started off it was really hard to let go of some of that workload because I thought like, no, this is my job, this is what I have to do. But I was able eventually to delegate and trust in this other person, and we managed to absolutely smash the workload within a number of weeks. It was great, pretty satisfying. When delegation works, it is really satisfying, and you can share the results as well.
Thanks for sharing that, Joseph. I'm not sure if Tom may have.
Yeah, if we lost him.
I think he's stunned into silence by your successful story.
I think he had one of the points there was like sharing the pain and then sharing the love. It's like the love was the satisfaction of actually getting the work done.
Absolutely.
In that instance, so yeah, it was the pain of, oh crap, there's a big workload here.
Yeah.
But then smashing it out of the park was sharing the love with the person that helped me out, and it was great.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just feel personally sometimes when I have to delegate tasks that I know are kind of like too low level and boring at times, I feel the pain in giving it out, not just because I feel like you could really bore this person to death. So I'm
there is
and that makes it difficult because I know I'll have to do it, but gosh.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's quite difficult.
Yeah,
balancing that.
But
then but I suppose that early on kind of like low level task is a good way of gauging how well that individual performs, and you can kind of like pick up on strengths and weaknesses that way, and then you can build up to for want of a better word, want of a better phrase, like more complicated tasks, more complicated work.
Especially if they're young and they're coming in with
for sure,
less experience, because you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with giving them an easy task to sort of test their strengths.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I remember one of the first main projects I worked on, and Henda, who's on the call, she was also involved with this, and it was very tedious work. every single day, over and over and over again, join the daily stand-up, and then the middle of COVID as well, so we'd always be sitting at homes doing this tedious work. But I remember myself and Hendo were laughing. We're sort of there for each other during that time, and even though we weren't necessarily delegating to each other, it was all coming down from somewhere else, and I'd like to say they were supportive in some ways. They were that you could call them up and they'd answer, and give you help whenever you needed. But yeah, it's an art, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me just give Tom a ping here, because I can't call him back in because he's not within my organization. So let me just see. Here he is. Hello, Tom.
Apologies.
No problem at all.
I got a 0 notice. We're updating your VPN software, so everything turned off.
Oh dear.
Thank you for that. Decided that was a good idea. Right. Hopefully you can see my screen again, and I'll carry on. I'm sorry, I missed the end of that.
I'm sure it was caught on the recording anyway. So
yeah,
it's fine. I was just saying about how the results of successful delegation are really satisfying, because you as the delegator can kind of revel in a successful result with the delegatee.
Yeah,
and it really is quite satisfying and a nice feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, if you've been delegated that responsibility and something is a success, then you are responsible for that success. Just like the person that delegated it to you is responsible for that success. So you know, everybody wins. If you get it right, everybody does win, which is a really good feeling. So yeah, the last one on here with delegation is tools. A quick example for me is Kanban boards. I could delegate. I'd assign people and say, you can do these colors, or you can do that column. Here's everything that needs doing now. And you know, you can make things run themselves, which helps a lot as well. Anyway, I will carry on because I've lost a couple of minutes there. So one last item on here, it's training. So I think the first one I'll put on here might not be what you expect. So obviously, yes, you want to fill those weaknesses and build people's knowledge, but you can build on strengths as well. You know, you can create experts. That's going to be down to who you're managing in some ways. If you see that there's someone that's really happy with one very specific area, say SysML, and they love just creating models all day, why not? Why not let them? You know, you don't have to make them understand every single last thing. You know, they can work with others for that reason. That's one thing to think about. Filling gaps where there are weaknesses. That's your sort of what you think as training is. So yeah, like I say, if you need to present in front of a business person and you think, oh, I really wish that person could do it, but they can't, maybe they can go on a presentation course and start to learn, and you can give them internal ones, build them up, things like that. Because it's not just courses, it's obviously on the job training as well. I think I mentioned earlier as well, aligning with individuals and the team and the business needs. As much as we'd all love to go on a robotics course or whatever, you know, it's not always feasible. So keep that in mind. However, sometimes it might be, if everybody kind of benefits from it as well. Another thing to consider is sometimes you're building for now and sometimes you're building for the future. So for example, before I really led a team, they actually sent me on I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a future leaders course. And I learned a lot of little skills in that, which I started applying to my sort of tasks that I owned. So by the time I became like the technical lead of the project, I had the tools at my disposal, and I was kind of ready. Well, I didn't really think at the time, but it turns out I probably was. So I was kind of ready for it. So yeah, that's another thing to think about. And for me, it wouldn't be right without considering the lessons you've learnt, or continuous improvement, however you want to call it. Relaying what you've learnt in the training to the wider team is, again, it's a great way to get in front of people and present, to get comfortable telling them what's going on. And obviously everyone's going to learn a little bit as well, which is great. Okay, so on to technical leadership. So key skills, I think subject matter expertise is a really helpful one, in my opinion. As I mentioned earlier, I redeveloped the sort of testing process for the customer. That was, that really put my foot in the door in terms of leadership. I was able to really sort of bring the team and explain how everything worked, and then send them out. And I'd send them out on the customer visits to run all this in person rather than going myself, which was good. I think product knowledge is good to have. You don't need it necessarily. However, it does make things easier. It does help a lot. It's a key part of the process. However, you can learn that as you go along if you have the correct expertise in your area. So if you're really good at modeling, you can model anything. It might take a bit longer for you to model a spaceship if you work on boats, for example. However, it's similar principles, and you can work with someone with that product knowledge to hopefully improve it. This is what I always try and tell everyone: template, process, review checklist. Do any of you work with those, or build them, or update them on a daily basis, or not daily, but a regular basis?
No, not from me, really.
No. See, this is, I found, depending on where you go, there's very varying amounts of this going on. But where you have those, if you have a template, process, and a review checklist, for example, you can create consistency, repeatability, you can create automation, improve efficiency, all the good stuff that makes you look good.
Yeah. And we do, sorry to interrupt. We do have it. I think maybe Tyler is just not getting what is being said here. We do have a process we follow in the railway industry, for example, that is tailored towards complying with important standards such as EN 50128. So we do have like we call it guide process. It just allows us to comply with those standards. So everything we do within our research and development team sort of follows that process or set of processes. Then we obviously have templates as a result of wanting to make sure everyone is doing the same thing. Then when work is produced, we do conduct like review processes, and I don't know if that's the sort of thing you had in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just provides that continuity as well. So, if you have someone in the middle of your team who just knows everything, he's great at it, and he's, I'll do that, don't worry, and then he leaves or goes to a different project, it's very difficult to fill those boots. I've got the last point there: forward thinking, planning ahead. You can plan ahead, but if that person goes and you haven't got a process, it becomes much more difficult. Your trust levels just drop, because now you've got to go and tell someone who probably hasn't done anywhere near as much as the guy you wanted to do this. They need to go and do that job. It just becomes very difficult, and you then have to do a lot more sort of hands-on, a lot more maybe meetings to kind of make sure you're all doing the right thing on the right track. It does prevent things like that. And yeah, it's about with that forward thinking, you've got to understand where the skills of everybody is or are, and at that point you should have those people trying to work with the guys who know everything, and that really does help in planning ahead. And templates, process, review, checklist almost get rid of that need. It makes it much easier. And then the last point on there, data centric. I'm not going to say too much. Data is great. I have a real hatred of documents. I've not met an engineer that enjoys writing a report. So there are ways to use the data to create the reports automatically. They become repeatable. If you can, I would work towards that. That's just a personal opinion. But yeah, if you can get to that point, even going back to the team morale, it's boosted because no one has to write thousands of pages of documents, which is always a bonus. There's that one as well. I think technical leadership. So one more point for yourselves is building your knowledge. You don't forget about yourself. However, you're going to have you're probably going to have a new way of thinking again. Similar to the delegation, you're on the other side now. You may be used to people coming up to you and saying, you should go and try and learn about this new thing. Well, if you're going into management and systems engineering, you sometimes have to be the one that's keeping up to date with industry or the new technologies or the new tools. Those are all great things to be aware of and learn about, so that you may be able to become maybe a cutting edge project, for example. It may be that you can't, but it's still good to know about what's out there, because it gives you an option. It gives you an idea. Maybe we can put this in retrospectively. Who knows? It's always interesting though. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, working towards that ACEP, CCEP, CEng. You do learn a lot from doing that. You learn about what's good, what's bad. You get to be around people who have been doing this sort of thing a few years, your mentors or the others who help you along the way, which again is good exposure to talk to those people. You'll usually learn quite a lot from them, which is great. Sorry, clicked the button. Another one, learn the systems you work on. As I mentioned, you don't need the product knowledge, but you should be learning about the systems. I bet there's a good chance we're all on very different systems. For example, I myself work on a platform management system in the marine area. I don't know if anyone else wants to volunteer a little bit of what they're working on.
Yeah, I work on a diagnostic tool, a generic diagnostic tool for a lot of our products, such as interlocking, RBC, and the rest of it. So we need to sometimes get alarms and faults diagnostic information when something goes wrong. And yeah, I work on that product specifically to just capture a lot of our user requirements and help the team understand what they need to do.
Yeah, great. And yeah, I've just seen surgical medical devices as well. 3 very different things, but we're all systems engineers, and that's what I sort of saying. It does help, but you could still. It's very transferable. Some of this. Might be getting another one there. Another sharing. I'll carry on. Another one is learning the capabilities of the tools you use. I've used some tools in some ways, and some tools in other ways. I've gone to another company and they just use it completely differently, sometimes good, sometimes very badly. And if you really understand what those tools are capable of, you can make a lot of difference, because those tools aren't popular and people don't pay for them because they're there. They paid for them because they've got this reputation that they're good, and there is a way to utilize them properly. So it's always worth understanding what they are capable of, what they can do. Another one here is you've got to competently sell systems engineering to senior team members or business people around you. I think that was a big shock when I left aerospace, was how difficult it was to get people to understand, listen, and want to invest in systems engineering. Yeah, it was a real shock. It still shocks me now, because I do it on a daily basis and see how the benefits are. But yeah, there's a lot of people that don't understand or see the benefits. I'm sure you've probably all come across somebody at some point that definitely doesn't understand it, but also possibly doesn't think it's good. Well, let's be honest, they're wrong, aren't they? So that's their problem, but it's also your problem, because you're probably going to have to solve how to sell it to them. As yet, the easiest way is to go to kind of the yeah, I can see roles is a problem. That surprises me a little bit, considering you've got to follow things like the ARP, the DO178, which are pretty much built on systems engineering. So yeah, again, it's difficult. So the way I try to see it is, well, if you can't beat them, join them, and then change them from the inside. So as you become a manager, you do start getting that option where you have a bit more sway, a bit more, I won't call it power, but a little bit more authority, let's say. Building knowledge, one that's a bit strange on that one, I put teach. I think when you teach people, it really helps you understand what they're looking for. It makes you think about what would you have liked to have known at that point in your time, and you'll often look back and think, oh yeah, here's some really good things that I could tell them, which I wish I'd have known back then. And you obviously learn as you teach. You have to learn things as well, so that's always good. And then yeah, no pressure, but you are there to become the key to successful systems engineering. Like I say, it can be difficult, but you've got to keep going, keep proving people wrong. That's how I look at it. Doing a pretty good job so far, so I'm going to keep at it for now. So just to give you a bit of time for questions, I've put on this slide, bring it all together. Hopefully you've kind of seen how I've been doing it a little bit as we've gone along, talking about who needs to be good at what, and training, and where to delegate, and it all kind of pulls together. I'm not going to go into too much more than that, really. Again, we're systems engineers, so we probably think in terms of the bigger picture. It's just about making sure that as you do things, you consider other aspects of the project or program as you go along as well. Another piece of just advice from my opinion is be yourself. You don't have to suddenly become a manager and be like the hard man or telling everybody what to do all the time and being strict or anything like that. Just be yourself. It's okay to be yourself. However, I did put on here, but push yourself. Like I said, sometimes things happen. You have to change. As the manager, you have to adapt a little bit. Maybe someone does need sort of forcefully encouraging, as I put. That's a little bit outside my comfort zone, to be honest, but sometimes I do it. You kind of get used to it. You just have to tell yourself, I'm going to be that red guy for a few minutes, and I'm going to go back to being blue afterwards. It's not easy, but it's doable. Okay, so thank you all for listening. Not everybody left, which is a good sign. And if you have any questions, please feel free to fire away. I'll bring up the page, see if there's anything in the chat window, or come off mute.
Thank you very much, Tom. That's been absolutely brilliant to hear. I guess my question is just at what sort of stage into your career did you start taking on that responsibility and the sort of a role where you would be able to delegate to people?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it was, for me, it was a little bit early. So I talked about the engine test project. I picked that up when I was a graduate, and before I was finished being a graduate, so I say I picked it up. I was under somebody, but kind of ran with it. And yeah, after about 15 months, something like that, they said, "Do you want to own the task?" So that was my first sort of, I was only paddling at that point because I owned the task, but I had maybe a 2-week patch during the year where all of a sudden the whole team would come to me, but it was all very much, it was a very confined piece of work. Over time, it's probably about, I think it was about 3.5 years, something like that, 3.5 to 4 years, where I ended up running a much larger program or project, well, medium size, and a larger one. I had about 13 engineers under me. I was about 5.5 years in, and that was full on, everything. Technically, they were under a line manager who just was never there, so I just de facto became the line manager. They basically said, you can do all that. It has to go through the real line manager, but you do all that. Which, that's at about 5.5 years. That was at the same company as well, so it was, it was probably a bit easier being in the same company than moving to a new one with a new team.
Brilliant. No other questions from me. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else has got any?
My question is, how do you balance technical leadership with core line management, the normal one-to-ones and check-ins and stuff like that, with actually your responsibility as a technical manager, if that makes sense?
Yep, yeah, that makes sense. I think for myself, as much as possible, I do like to prioritize my team rather than the technical side. So, if I have an hour or half an hour or however long one-to-one set, I do my best not to cancel it. I do my best to go and fully engage and prepare for the session. I want to make sure that the team is happy. If they're not happy, they might be leaving, they might be thinking about leaving, they might not be performing as well. If you go and show them attention, they're going to be happy about that. Equally, there are times when, if there's a big milestone coming up, you do kind of have to drop everything. Generally, I find that people are okay with that. It's just a case of, make sure you sort of get that back in as soon as possible as well.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
So that's pretty much bang on 6 o'clock. I know there's a couple more slides, I believe, just about INCOSE themselves. So I'll just fire this in just for your guys' knowledge, and hopefully anyone who's watching the recording. It's very easy to become a UK member for INCOSE. We will be changing to IFSE, so the Institute for Systems Engineering, at some point in the future, but for now it's still INCOSE UK. If you want to get involved with the ECF without becoming an INCOSE UK member, then use the above email up at the top there, so ecf-chair@incoseuk.org, and we'll get back to you. yeah, either way, we'll get you on the mailing list and keep you up to date with these sort of things. We have summer events in person. We always have a breakout session at the annual Systems Engineering Conference. So I believe I've mentioned that maybe on the next page. Yeah, so ASEC this year is being hosted up in Edinburgh. The topic is New Beginnings, which is linked in with the change from INCOSE over to IFSI. It'll be on the 5th and 6th of November, and it will be a great couple of days, and hopefully a great opportunity to meet people with a similar mindset.
Yep, I'll be there as well. It'll be good to see you.
There you go. Meet
Yeah.
all of us.
That would
Yeah.
be nice. Right. Okay, thank you, Tom. I don't know if Aline will be coming as well, but it will be nice to see you there. To be part of a lot of our series this year. Yeah.
I will try.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
This was just an example from last year's ECF workshop that we did, but there'll be another one coming up this year, which will hopefully be as beneficial, if not more. I think that's it in terms of mentioning everything. So again, thank you, Tom, very, very much. Thank you for everyone who's still here that attended, and obviously everyone else who's jumped in and out and asked questions and stuff. So thank you very much. I hope to see you all again very soon. And I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thanks, Tyler.